the whole thing started in a sad way. In 1991, Jamie had graduated from college and had two Italian friends, and he wanted to take them down the Connecticut River. Allison raced over here and said, "They've called me from Windsor. I've got to get to Windsor. Something's wrong." We went up to Windsor and we're trying to help Allison, and eventually she found out that Jamie had died, had drowned.
He hopped out of his boat to rescue one of the others. He had on him boots, and they filled with water, and they pulled him down and he drowned.
We had the memorial service. The church was full, crammed.
When my son died, we created an obituary that said people could make donations to a fund that would be used to help the environment. It was kind of vague at that time, but it so describes the Pinnacle without knowing it was going to be the Pinnacle.
You know, it was obvious that the Pinnacle was very important for him. I felt we ought to do something, you know, that was substantial and would really mean something to the community and keep the memory of Jamie alive.
Well, right after Jamie died, I had, I would say, energy or something, and I had to do something with it. And so there was the Pinnacle.
We all put it together and said that we should do try to save the Pinnacle in Jamie's name.
I just remember talking to Bev about what project we could do, and Jamie loved the Pinnacle, so we settled on the Pinnacle right away.
We were able to, in 1996, actually have the Littmans then give us, and they gave us the Pinnacle. They just gave it to us. I mean, they did not ask us to pay for it. We got it. Because they learned over the years, and they realized over the years, that this land really wasn't theirs, and you can't buy a piece of land that was public and had been public for years and years and years. As it says right here in the newsletter, this idea initially developed as a possible use of the Jamie Latham Memorial Fund, which was established at the time of his death. Since Jamie had a great love of the outdoors, the Pinnacle was one of his favorite places.
I just want to say that this whole thing started 6 years ago, almost exactly 6 years ago. But for the first 3 years, we really struggled along and didn't accomplish much of anything. Then 3 years ago, there were a small group of us sitting in the Littman's kitchen, and Jonas suggested, well, maybe there might be a way from the north, which we'd never thought of before. And so we proceeded to investigate the north, mainly Allison proceeded to investigate the north. And as she did, she found this particular piece of property, which is 171 acres, and she bought it. And held it for us until we could buy it. And that is what made this trail possible. Now, when I cut the ribbon, which I'm going to do right now, my biggest thank you is to Jamie. And in his memory, this trail is.
Oh, boy.
One of the things that I've been privileged to do is to work on this project and work with the Pinnacle Association to initiate what I think could be one of the regions, not the state, but one of the region's most outstanding conservation projects. 405 or 415 acres, and that's now protected forever until the world blows up, essentially, in perpetuity, as a public wildlife reserve and ridgeline trail. That is something that's extraordinary for a small community.
So there were mountains here about 400 million years ago. We were in the tropics. Then a lot of rain fell in 400 million years. The mountains eroded away. Dinosaurs came and went. 20,000 years ago, there was a huge ice sheet a mile thick that stole our topsoil and dumped it in Long Island. 13,000 years ago, the ice melted back. 10,000 years ago, the trees came. About that time, the people came. 300 years ago, the European settlers are here. Sheep was farmed here. What little soil that the glacier had left, a lot of it was taken away by the sheep that eroded away the vegetation. And here we are today, standing 1,000 feet above sea level on hard rock on what had started out as deep ocean muds.
Let us toast our achievement. The dream become reality. The pinnacle is protected. A trail to the pinnacle created and protected. And the beginnings of a wildlife corridor established. We are here. This is ours. This will be theirs who come after us. Supportive members, endlessly toiling trustees, initiator, enabler, visionary, grant finder, generous donors, all of you. Rocks, soil, trees, flora, fauna, vista, the pinnacle. We salute you.
The top of the Pinnacle was a destination for people from town going on picnics. And, the school class used to go up there once a year. 4-H group sometimes would have a big meeting up there, that sort of thing. And so people in the town were well aware of it, and it was important to them.
There was a teacher, Claire Oglesby. She taught 1st and 2nd grade in the little Westminster West schoolhouse, and she used to take her students there every year.
I think it was in 1st grade when I went to the Westminster West School. We would go up there and we would hike on up. We would write about what we saw in journals when we got to the top, and we would see all sorts of nature stuff up on the way and learn about nature. If we saw something that we wanted to write down, we would write about it.
And she, for some reason, was a very magical teacher. Everybody really enjoyed her, so she had a lot of influence on what kids did.
Instead of hearing about, oh, this is what happens in a classroom and reading about it, we got to go out and see it ourselves, which was pretty cool and actually made it easier to understand because you could actually see it. I think it's good that we are preserving and making these trails. I think it's really good.
Our vision was that it was just going to be, a trail up to the Pinnacle and the Pinnacle. We didn't imagine that it was going to be 2,000 acres going through 5 or 6 towns.
The big push was for recreational trails for access and for trails for fun. And it's true that the wildlife habitat was important, but with climate change, the focus has shifted enormously, so that now we're thinking about connectivity.
Right.
And the growth, instead of being just growth for me having a trail that goes from point A to point B, for people, it's for point A to point B, for bears, for deer, for
Moose and
small animals to move as climate requires them to move for their own survival. Mm-hmm. It's a huge difference and a big growth. A response to the times.
I never really ever expected us to get any beyond just getting to the pinnacle, but it kept coming. There was something going on at that time, that things would just fall into place.
As though the fates were just on our side.
They did.
It was that people had pieces of land that had been in one family for a long time were available because the families were tired of paying the taxes, and these pieces were just available.
Yes, everything worked out. It really had, like God had his hand on it.
Our favorite line when we were applying to VHCB for money is that the Pinnacle was a small state park run on volunteer labor. They must have liked that because they kept on contributing, and still do.
So I think the most meaningful thing that I have ever done in my life, aside from teaching and the family, which are also like the most meaningful things.
For the people who are inspired by the Pinnacle, I would say, go and do the same, and find a place where find the need and know it's important, stick with it. Don't be discouraged. Be sure of your steps, work with others, collaborate, stick with the vision.
If they have a dream that is worth it, that is important to them, talk with others, see if you can put together a vision of what you want, of what you feel there ought to be, and go for it.
I hope for the future that we get this trail from Bald Hill all the way out to the Pinnacle.
Please take care of it and help it to continue and grow.
Just follow the rules, keep it clean, don't trash it.
I would like you to leave it as you find it. Don't leave anything behind.
You go in and look and see and enjoy and maybe take a picture with your camera, but don't remove.
Just remember that we're here for a little short time, and we have to steward what we live on.
Bring your grandchildren. I think that's important, that we have to keep having young generations come.
It's just very important for the health and well-being of this part of the world.
Use your eyes. Use your camera. Enjoy.
But do take care of it.
We don't think we own it. We only take care of it for a while. There's a pretty obvious bump. That's Goddard Hill. That's bigger and more distinct. And then it rises to Bemis Hill, which is the northernmost peak of the ridge of Windmill Mountain. So you go down from Bemis Hill bump by bump by bump by bump. One of those bumps will be Paul's Ledges, or the backside of Paul's Ledges. One of the bumps will be the hill where Doug Avery lives, or his house. Then you'll go along and the Pinnacle will come up. You can just look from the top of Bemis Hill and keep looking right down in that direction, and as far as you can see, that whole ridge is conserved, so it's going to look just about the way it looks right now for the foreseeable future. We won't say in perpetuity, we'll just say for the foreseeable future.